Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. David Richman is an endurance athlete who's competed in over 50 triathlons, 15 Ironman competitions, and many, many marathons. When his sister was diagnosed with a brain tumor, he found himself in a state of emotional chaos. The experience sent him on a quest to try to understand it all. His answer? A 5,000-mile cross-country bike ride, interspersed with interviews of others also impacted by cancer. And what resulted is an amazing book called Cycle of Lives that will have you laughing and crying as David endures heat, trucks, alligators, and so much more as he traverses the country on a search for answers. David, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us a little bit about your book and the story behind it.
Oh, thank you, Pat. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So, where it started was like a lot of things were happening in my life, and there was not much of it was very positive. And I was just going through transformation, as I've heard you say a few times when interviewing people. The truth about transformation is it hurts and it's hard, really hard. Like change is not so hard. Transformation is tough. And I was going through a transformation, trying to become healthy, getting out of a bad relationship, learning how to be a single dad with, 4-year-old twins. And there's just a lot of stuff. And at that time, my sister called me up and told me that she had terminal brain cancer. And obviously with a husband and young kids and a vibrant job and a good circle of friends, that was obviously devastating news. And to make a long story short, what I kind of discovered through her journey and her allowing me into this life was that people were really well equipped to deal with the kind of the tasks around their cancer, Pat. So how do I navigate the healthcare system? How do I get better access to benefits at work? How can I have my friends take care of my kids while I'm off getting chemo? How do I eat healthier? What resources are available to me blah, blah, blah. But what they were not equipped to do, Pat, was to deal with the emotional side of the trauma.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it just comes out of nowhere, and nothing in life prepares you for this.
Nothing. In fact, that's exactly what you just said is exactly the impetus for the book, was that what I wanted to do when I discovered this very common theme, and it didn't matter, patient, survivor, loved one, caregiver, professional, doctor, you name it. The emotional side of that trauma of cancer was just something that most people either hadn't processed or, definitely if they had processed it, they were not comfortable talking to other people about it. It's just a weird kind of absolute parallel in everybody's experience. But what you said, nothing prepares you for it, is I found people that were willing to discuss that, but it was the point, Pat, where they encountered cancer. So patient, survivor, loved one, a young person seeing their father go through cancer, whatever. Point B is today. How did the emotional journey from point A to point B, how did that take place? Or can we talk about how it's taking place in relation to all the trauma and all the nonsense that happened before point A? Because even though cancer is about the cancer, certainly if you were stuck in an abusive relationship, or if you had a problem with drugs, or if you were abandoned by your fiance as you walked into surgery, or if you saw your parent commit suicide, or if all these other things that might have happened to you affected the way that you dealt or didn't deal with the emotional side of it. So what I did with the book, Pat, was really dive really deep into 15 people's journeys with cancer, but I did it in relation to the things that you and I and everybody else could identify to, the things that we all go through as humans, and then how did that affect the cancer journey? And the goal is just to better equip people to talk about the emotional side, to connect. And I know you're all about, connecting and in a heart centered way. Um, and that's what I that's that that was the whole impetus for the book.
Now, for readers who haven't read the book, for listeners rather, that haven't read the book, it is set against the backdrop of a 5,000-mile cross country bike trip that you did.
Yeah. So, okay. So I thought about what connects us as humans, right? The only thing, I mean, really, there's only two things that connect us as humans, I believe, and that's emotions and our love of story. And stories change people. I listened to a couple of the interviews that you did, and people were like, "Oh, once I sat down and wrote my story, I came to all these epiphanies." Right? Stories change people, and we're really only connected by emotion, right? If you're stuck under the water, you have the fear of drowning. 100% of the people alive have that fear, right? Joy. We all experience joy at a certain point. So what I said was that if we're all connected by those things, right, emotions and storytelling, what better way than to connect us than connect these stories metaphorically by connecting them by zigzagging around on a bike, a solo ride to meet these people? Because I had talked to them for a couple of years, but I hadn't met most of them. And so I said, let me jump on my bike. I did 4,700 miles in 45 days. So it was brutal. I did 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, getting from point A to point B every day, talking to people along the way, visiting cancer centers, meeting with the people in the book. And really, it was mind boggling how constant that theme of people being unequipped to talk about the emotional side of the cancer, and from as an observer or as a participant, how common that was, and it just kind of powered me through almost every day, Pat.
What did you hope to get out of this personally, and what did you get out of it?
um, so what I hope to get out of it personally was, um, this idea of meditation and kind of like becoming grounded and centered is something that I think leads to change. I mean, gosh, if COVID didn't test us, show us anything, it showed us that we all had to collectively take a deep breath, and out of that, a lot of transformation is happening. And I had hoped on this bike ride, if I'm going to be gone for 6 weeks and I'm biking and I'm all by myself, that I would be able to meditate and kind of come to terms with losing my sister, come to terms with, some of the other emotional issues in my life. That's what I had hoped to do. What I did was not only that, but I kind of it really sunk in to me the deep meaning behind a lot of these stories and how profoundly important they are as tools to help guide us through being there for the people that are in our lives in a meaningful way, to help them with the difficult things that they're doing. And that's what I really got out of this, was a really deeper sense of how to really connect in a meaningful, grounded, heart-centered, you know, um, real connecting way. And that's really what I got out of it.
You talk about how people don't want to talk about this, and I think there's a lot of truth in that, but I think it's hard. It's also difficult because your emotions keep changing. How you feel on day one will be different than how you feel on day 10, will be different than how you feel in year 5 and in year 10. And this constant evolution of the emotional aspect of it, I don't think it's steady. I don't think it's linear. I think it's up and down and all over the place. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to process as well as to talk about.
Oh, no doubt. Probably a little more difficult to process it than talk about it, but you got to be safe to be able to talk about it, because processing, like you said, could happen at different times, immediately upon hearing a diagnosis, or having given diagnoses as a oncologist for 40 years, right? There's there's different points along that journey that are going to have different emotions, right? But we still only have the same, very few basic human emotions, right? So that's that part of it, but it's the being safe to talk about it, being safe to know that other people care, that they want to understand, that they want to be there for you in the way that you need them to be there. That's a really difficult bridge to go through. Who cannot identify with this? Okay. You're walking along and all of a sudden you run into an old friend and you say, "Oh my gosh, how are you?" And they're like, "Oh, it's been a really bad year. My husband's parents both died of cancer this year." And you go, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then you keep walking because you're like, "I don't know what the heck to say."
Yeah.
Like
I
what?
think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, like, what do I do? And I think we're just so shocked at how to interact with people that are going through or have gone through such unbelievable trauma. Um, that's the tough part, right? That's the really tough part is, Pat, do people care about what I'm going through? Am I safe to explore it with them? Can I find some peace and comfort with other people? Because oftentimes there's not any peace or comfort, you know that. But can I at least search for it in other people? And will the people around me care about me enough to make this a meaningful place for me to talk about what I'm going through? That's heavy stuff, right?
It is, and I think one of the surprises that many people find in going through these experiences is that people they thought would be there are not, and people that they never
Mm,
expected step up to the plate. But the
absolutely.
loss of the loss of those relationships and those social networks is very painful and very deep.
Yeah, boy, you really said it. That was a theme that was not uncommon. It wasn't in every single story, but it was in most stories that, and I understand. I understand it. I didn't understand it before. Like, oh, how could how could your college roommate leave you when they've heard about your diagnosis, right? How could I mean, in one instance, Pat, one of the book subjects, he was being, prepared for removal of a very delicate and large sarcoma in his abdomen, and the doctors kept coming in saying, "Well, this is what we're doing. This, you know how they do beforehand. You know what we're doing. We're cutting you here, and we're taking out this, and your name is this, and you know that you could die, and da da da." And they do this like 15 times right before your surgery to make sure that you know what's going on. He's there doing that, and his girlfriend stands up right before he gets welled in and says, "This is not my life. I can't do it,"
Oh my God.
and walks out. Okay. There's another one where a woman is literally going to the hospital to check herself in. Her fiance is on a business trip, and he calls her up and says, "Yeah, I can't come back. I don't. I'm not into this anymore. I can't be there for you. And in fact, somebody else needs me more." As she's in a taxi cab on her way to the hospital to deal with her first surgery.
Oh, I actually had a very similar experience, and
It's unbelievable.
it is unbelievable.
But what you said was, it's shocking how common it is for you to lose the people that you want to rely on, that you think are so important to you, that you hope would be there. So then it becomes much easier to not trust anybody, to not open up, to not go to support groups, to not lean on people, to back away, right? So the gentleman that got abandoned, getting wheeled into surgery, would he let anybody take him to his chemo? No, right? Would he let anybody know at work that he was going to have to take a day off to take care of himself? No, because he didn't want to put anybody in a position to think that he needed them and then they would leave him again. And it's like,
Well, and it's just easier. It's just easier than dealing with other people's needs.
right. But Pat, if somebody that you care about senses that you don't want their help, then they think, oh, well, they're just being strong, or maybe it's me, or whatever. Maybe it has nothing to do with any of that. Maybe they're just fearful that they don't have a safe place to rely on you. Right. So there could be a whole number of things that are behind it. And I think what we all yearn for, I think, especially in times of turmoil, is to make some sense of it. And I think the only way that we make some sense of it is to be able to talk about it and be able to interact and be able to think that other people care. Um,
But that's easier said than done. And for all the reasons we're talking about, because of the way people react, but it's also hard to find a safe place no matter what. I think a lot of
mhm,
support groups tend towards the lowest common denominator. They're really not necessarily the place to tell your story. And it depends on the
mhm.
group, it depends on the people. But the system is not concerned about your mental health and well being, generally speaking.
Not at all. Not at all. It's shocking, but it's not just related to cancer, right? I mean, that is a general statement related to everything, right? I mean, the mental aspect of it is just not, it's, I don't know why, Pat, we're just, our brains are just not wired to deal with that. I remember talking to one of the book participants, an oncologist, and I asked her what was the one, I mean, we talked about many things that were revelations to her as a breast cancer oncologist for nearly 40 years and very, very well respected, both as a surgeon and in the wellness community. And I asked her, what were some of these revelations? And one of the revelations that she came up with is that, which I'm sure was not original to her, but she definitely recognized it over 40 years, was that the human brain is just not wired to understand its own mortality. And she said, and as a result of that, we all just naturally live in some kind of denial that anything is going to take us down. And even when you're faced with it, you just kind of partly just don't believe it. And it's like, if you're not willing to accept the fact that you're fragile, how can you treat the fact that you're fragile? And so the mental health part of it, I mean, that's probably only one of 100 reasons why it's not dealt with correctly. But what the heck, Pat, you and I are here to change that a little bit, right?
Well, I think it's first and foremost an emotional journey, actually. And because it is, I think that you can learn a lot along the way. With 5,000 miles to pedal and think, what are some of the things that you learned?
um, I learned one that nobody thinks well, there's a few people, but most people don't believe that their life is spectacular. Oh, nobody's going to be interested in my story, or I'm sorry to bore you with this story. Meanwhile, you get into the story and you're realizing, oh my God, it's absolutely ridiculous, right? That's one. Um, so I would say that one of the things I learned is um, that everybody's got a very interesting story, right? Everybody does. The other thing I learned was that I probably was very guilty of because I'm very observant and I've always considered myself a very observant person. And it's one of the things I kind of pride myself on, especially as an author, is being observant, being able to write about it. But I think I was very wrong in that I maybe came to assumptions about what I thought people were going through. People are going through way more than they ever let you know, way more. And it's very humbling. And if somebody allows you into their life and they trust you to let you know some of the undercurrents, that's a very wonderful place to be. And so I think it's a gift to be a good listener. I think it's a gift to interact with people in a meaningful way. I think it's a gift to lean in and connect with people, like you say, in a heart, in a heart-centered way. Um, and so I learned that that is a gift to be able to find out more. I also learned that biking on interstates is a little dangerous because I did that for about, I don't know, maybe 4,000 of the 5,000 miles I was on interstates. I still have a little PTSD every time I'm biking and a loud truck comes from behind me. I'm just, so I'd say I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot.
What were some of the more interesting side trips that you took on the back roads?
um, That's so funny. I did not take a lot of back roads because I had to get from point A to point B. But there were some interesting things. I'll tell you, Texas is really interesting. I'd spent quite a bit of time in Austin and maybe a little bit in Dallas and Houston, but I had never like been like in the back roads of Texas. And There was one day, Pat, when I literally biked like 17 hours. It was completely ridiculous, and it was hot, hot, Texas hot, and I ran out of water a couple of times. And this was one of the days where I was on back roads. I wasn't on the interstate for the entire day, and it was absolutely shocking that every single farm, every single house, they all had something showing their love of Texas, right? And you always hear about everybody loves Texas, right? Texans love Texas. Man, they have 50-foot Texas flags, and they have massive wrought iron statues about the Star of Texas, and I'm just like, it is no joke, man. People love Texas, so that was one that was really a fun epiphany for me. Um, I do know that one of the stranger dilemmas I had was I was in Louisiana, and I'm on the road, and to the right of me is basically a swamp, and to the left of me is 80 mile an hour, 15,000 pound trucks going at 2 feet away. And I was like, which one do I rather be? Do I want to be afraid of the truck that runs me into the swamp, or do I want to be afraid of the swamp that runs me into the traffic? It's a wild world out there. I also noticed that there's way too much roadkill out there. So that was an epiphany. So I could keep going, Pat. I could tell you a million stories. It was really a blessing to be able to spend 6 weeks biking, because driving across country in 3 days in a hurry is way different than biking for 6 weeks and in a hurry. But still, I got to see a lot.
Travel's interesting. You fly and you get there quickly, hopefully. Just given the way you have to change planes these days, it may not be
Right.
that quick. Driving gives you a little bit more sense of what's happening. But when you go down to a self propelled method of travel, it is a totally different story and a totally different experience.
Oh, no doubt. And the only thing I regret about the bike ride itself, I mean, it was beautiful. It was awesome. I loved pushing myself as hard as you could. By the end of the day, I was absolutely a wreck every day. It was, like I said, I'm not even exaggerating, 12, 14, 16, 17 hours a day of cycling, which was it's an insane amount of cycling, and the heat and the problems with my stomach and all this other stuff. And then I'd get up every day and do it again. I only took 4 rest days during the whole thing. And it was a real joy to be able to do it. But the one thing I could change, if I could change it, is just to take a little bit more time, so that I could have enjoyed just a little bit more of what I was seeing. I'm not going to say it's enough to make me want to do it again, because it was pretty hard, but it was really different. And it's interesting when you're a passenger, like you said, on a plane, you're just kind of shuttled along like cattle. But when you're in charge of where you're going and what you're doing, it's really pretty cool, right? It's a totally different experience.
How did you train for this?
I joke around that the best way to train for a 5,000-mile bike ride is to do a 5,000-mile bike ride. I don't know that there's any training. I'm an endurance athlete. I've done, 16 Ironmans. I've run 4 straight marathons. I've run 100-mile runs. I've done, you know, 50 runs of at least 50 miles. I mean, I've done a lot of endurance athletics. Um, and I thought I was trained for it because I would bike for hours a day leading up to the event, and just, kind of get my body used to it. But it was hard. It was really, really hard. If I could have taken more time, I would have recouped a bit more. But by the end, I was pretty wiped out. My body was pretty, and my wife likes to say that, which is pretty accurate. I wasn't back to normal for about a year after. I mean, I was wiped out because, like I said, I only took 4 days off. And I think my shortest day was one day I did 7 hours. And I don't think I had another day that was under 10 hours of full on biking. So that's a
Is
lot.
there a connection between this almost physical exertion and a mental emotional purge of sorts?
Absolutely 100%. Um, and I think it's that way with any kind of really big time traumatic, whether it's self-imposed or not, right? You can't say that, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things that are traumatic, right? Watching your child go off to college or losing a loved one, or I mean, there could be positive and negative things, but let's just say things that affect you a lot emotionally, that drain you in one way or another. It's kind of like an impetus for you to grow, right? They call it when you're an empty nester, what do? You can figure out what's the next thing. I think one of your guests mentioned, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I had to stop doing what I wanted to do. Well, what do they call that? The second act, right? I think anything that we go through that is life altering, again, self-imposed or not, is an opportunity for us to grow. And that's one of the things I like about endurance athletics is it breaks you down to a level where you dig yourself such a hole that you got to figure out a way to get out of it. And there's a lot to learn about that. There's a lot to learn through that.
Psychologically, it toughens you up a great deal, and it also strips away all the superfluous things, don't you think?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not perfect at it, Pat, but I'm so much better at kind of keeping things into perspective and not letting little things bother me. Um, I'll tell you a super quick story. Okay, so I'm getting ready to do this Ironman, and oh no, it was the 50. It was this 50-mile run in just insane heat. It was like 120 degrees that day, and in Vegas, it was like one of the hottest days on record. And there was a 50-mile run scheduled, and I was going to do it. And I woke up a little bit late, and I raced to the start line. Okay. And I don't have everything ready. I got the wrong shoes. I don't have all my nutrition done. I didn't get to get into my race mode. And all of a sudden we take off, and I'm like 3 minutes late to take off or whatever. And I'm trying to catch up and get on my thing and just like settle my brain and the whole thing. And I'm like beating myself up over all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, this stinks. And why do I have to do this? And then I went, whoa, 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 dude, nobody's paying you. Nobody's forcing you to do this. This is all you, right? You're going to complain about something you want to do. What about people that don't have the opportunity to do this stuff, right? What about people that don't choose to do this stuff? You're going to learn a lot out there today. You better just accept it and be happy about it, right? And I'm like, yeah, why am I going to be negative about something I chose to do? And I kind of take that to another level. I tried never to say, Pat, I have to do something. Oh, I have to go to the store. No, I get to go to the store. Oh, I have to cook dinner. No, I get to, right? And so I really do think that that these kind of things can change your perspective. And for me, it's not even trite. It's a big deal, right? It's a big deal to be able to come out of these mini or major transformation opportunities and come out learning more about yourself.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. You can subscribe to our free podcast at www.bumpintheroad.us or become a premium member to hear the full conversation. Just go to www.bumpintheroad.us for more information and to sign up.